Welcome to the final edition of the Tuesday Rotowire NFL podcast. I'm Joe Bartel. Alongside me is Jake Letarski. And with no other fantasy sports going on, we are into the playoffs right now. We'll be breaking down the waiver wire edition of the show, the award show portion of it, giving out awards to Cordero Patterson, among others, of the top waiver wire pickups and your favorite fantasy plays this year. Stick around. This is Rotowire Fantasy Sports. I was going to say Rotowire Fantasy Sports Day, but the Rotowire podcast. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 11th edition of the Rotowire NFL podcast, brought to you by WinBet. Again, I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports. And alongside me, as always, or at least most of the season, last 2 weeks been a little bit different, is Jake Letarski. Jake, before we get into the award show and break it down for the listeners, what we're going to be doing today, I want to get a word from our sponsors, WinBet. They've been there for the entire season. If there's one making the right decision, I have an incredible offer for you guys to listen up with Rotowire's newest partner, WinBet, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WinBet is now the exclusive sponsor for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. WinBet brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more right at your fingertips. If you want to break from sports betting, head to WinBet's digital casino, take a spin on roulette, double down on blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WinBet is currently available in 7 states: Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding at WinBet. The possibilities are limitless. WinBet is currently offering all Rotowire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WinBet now. That's WYNNBET. WinBet, the exclusive partner for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. All right, Jake, like I said, to start the show, not a lot of fantasy stuff going on because the season is officially over. We have made it through the week, the 18-week grind. We have our number one Packers at the top of the NFC. Somehow the Titans have made to the top of the AFC. I have no idea how that really occurred. We can get into that a little bit more and discuss what our playoff thoughts are. But overall, this show will be highlighting the key waiver wire pickups that hopefully we identified throughout the season, that hopefully also have made your season winning one, and also any other fantasy tidbits that you and I kind of discussed throughout the day.
Yeah, exactly. First, I want to say it's good to be back. I missed a couple of weeks. I was sad to miss you guys. It was a hilarious kind of coincidence. I mean, I had a family member get COVID, got the Omicron, so I couldn't go back for Christmas. My brother and some friends went to the Bucs game instead, as a replacement Christmas plan, and sure enough, we got COVID there. So I've been out of the office, out of the studio. You can see I'm back at home here with the two gods of Wisconsin sports behind me, Giannis and Aaron Rodgers here. And it's good to be back. And I know I've groaned a little bit about extending later into the season than normal. But if you're with us today, thank you very much. We'll run through the waiver wire pickups, that the league winning waiver wire pickups, and hopefully give you some strategy that we can give you the context on what led to these players being identified and why they were solid. And then if you remember from way, way back in the preseason, we did a bunch of team win total over-unders, and we'll recap that at the very end here, see how our overall plays did, our best bets played. And so we should have a fun show. And thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, and identifying value throughout the season, whether it be a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, it's not just a waiver wire thing too. I think, like, for example, we'll discuss Joe Burrow, and we could probably dive right in now as a good segue. But obviously Joe Burrow was the league winner for a lot of people over the past 2 or 3 weeks with the Bengals offense and doing what they did to get to the AFC North crown. I think we're going to have to take a look as to how we really identify these young quarterbacks, because this year, the rookies that were taken, none of them really had tremendous fantasy value. But you look back in the year before, both Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow were fantastic. And I thought where they're being drafted at that time made them fantasy relevant. And certainly, given what the production they had before Burrow went down, he was right there. Well, now we have back again for Herbert.
Yeah.
Off air, Herbert was great.
I'm with you. Yeah, you might have to tighten up that mic cord a little bit here. It's a little bit scratchy in and out. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
But I'll give you some time to do that while I talk about Burrow here. Joe Burrow, I put him, again, now a waiver wire show. it depends on your league format here. You know, if you were in a 10-team league, there's a good chance Burrow wasn't drafted. Anything beyond that, he was probably drafted. And it also depends on when you draft too, because right, if you drafted late in the season, you know, the last week before the regular season, chances are you knew that Burrow was going to be fine here. I mean, he was where he was drafted, even then, was as a QB2, if you're even taking a QB2. Because if you remember way back when, he was having that great rookie season, but then he tore both his ACL and MCL in week 11. And for much of the offseason, you know, usually this is a one-year rehab deal here. It wasn't always certain that he was going to suit up and be ready to go week 1. Now, if you look at NFFC ADP from before the year, he finished as QB 13. So, you know, that accounts for a lot of late drafts too. So it really depends, again, on your league format if he was a waiver wire. But obviously, if you picked him up or acquired him at some point, that was a league winner. He finished as QB 8 overall in the season. I'm just using a standard Yahoo scoring league that I had. But, I mean, he was a player that absolutely made the difference for you here. And somehow in Stake League, I ended up with Herbert and Burrow. And while Herbert finished higher, I traded Burrow to Harry, and Harry ended up, you know, top 2, top 3 in points on the season here. So I was just trying to pawn off my QB2. You know, I was like, hey man, you want Burrow to pair up with Chase, right? You're sick of Tannehill. Let's make a deal. And little did I know that he would destroy me with Burrow and Chase in the playoffs. So, you know, funny story, it all comes back full circle. But, yeah, you definitely have to watch those guys coming back from injuries. And sophomore quarterbacks. I mean, are there any sophomore quarterbacks next year? I don't know if I'm ready to believe in Trevor Lawrence right away. I mean, okay, he had an okay, you know, week 18 here. But, you know, remember he went through that stretch of games where he went 6 games or so and threw only 1 touchdown pass, like since Halloween. So, I mean, that is going to make me really hesitant to touch him, and I don't think he'll be a top 20 ADP quarterback next year. Now, I know you were a Lawrence guy. Are you going to buy the sophomore buy-in? And I'm trying to think, like, there's a real quarterback controversy in San Francisco, so I don't know if Trey Lance takes over, you know, for Jimmy G. They both, you know, Jimmy G has played pretty well, led him to the playoffs for the most part. And then, of course, you look at Justin Fields in Chicago. If they can get any kind of semblance of a decency in the organization, just because of his rushing, I think he maybe has the best chance of any of the rookies this year to have a somewhat breakout sophomore season and be productive.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who the Jaguars have as a head coach. We were talking off air right before the show started that the odds-on favorite right now is Bill O'Brien. If Bill O'Brien is your head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars next year, I'm completely out of Trevor Lawrence and that franchise. There might as well be 31 teams in the NFL because the Jaguars can be sent off to the moon. That's just the most ridiculous choice that could possibly be made. I don't believe they're actually going to go that direction. I thought with how bad Shad Khan, their owner, has reacted to being made a fool of, the one person that would make you look even more foolish than hiring Urban Meyer in the first place is Bill O'Brien. I mean, it has to be Byron Leftwich, right? It should. That's the only sensible move for the Jaguars to make. If I were a Jaguars fan, and I know we have plenty at HQ, if you don't hire Byron Leftwich, a boycott, right? It's right in front of your face. Hire that man. He has been successful. He's ready, and I don't know why you wouldn't. If there's something behind the scenes or whatever, who knows? He's definitely paid his dues. Of course, he's got you know, the experience with the organization. I think he has to be the guy over there. I think the answer to the second-year quarterback question for me is probably Justin Fields. And I hate saying that as a Packers fan, but I was pretty impressed with what he could do from a fantasy perspective. His legs are going to be fantastic. And I also think Trey Lance will be very good too, if and when the 49ers do move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah. I mean, he worked out a lot of the kinks this year. There's a whole draft ahead. Now, who knows if who they're going to hire as their new GM and if they'll draft any good, but you have to imagine that they'll get him a little bit of help, whether it be offensive line or in forms of weapons. Montgomery is excellent. Darnell Mooney, who we'll talk about maybe a little bit later, had a breakout year. So there's enough there. I mean, Cole Kmet is getting better. There's enough there, I think, you know, weapon-wise. But really, why he'll be a top 12 fantasy quarterback, maybe not top 12, top 15 fantasy quarterback, is going to be due to his legs. I imagine the keys are going to be handed over to him next year. You know, they have nothing to lose here necessarily. So, I mean, first-year coach it'll be, or maybe not a first-year coach if they do a retread, but, you know, you have to think the guy's job will be pretty safe after the first year. So it's not like Nagy where it's like, well, we have a better chance to win with Dalton, but I need to develop Fields. What am I going to do? This will be Fields the whole way out with little controversy here. And as long as he doesn't manages not to get himself injured, he would be the guy
who would be the sophomore to look at as a possible big bump. To win fantasy football leagues, you don't win fantasy leagues by taking a quarterback in the first 3 rounds. We talk about this every single year. You have to find that guy in rounds 8, 9, 10 or beyond that is going to end up a top 8 quarterback. And I think Fields has a much better chance to do it than Lawrence or any of the other rookies.
Yeah. And it's interesting. The other guy we should probably mention is Mac Jones, who ended up being QB1-ish value, certainly at different times. I know the end of the season notwithstanding, but we talk about the rookie quarterbacks and Fields and Lance and maybe even Zach Wilson, depending on what the Jets do. And yet here, Mac Jones was the most productive one in a system that we know was catered to him. And now he'll have a second year under his belt, getting more comfortable with his weapons.
Yeah, I mean, Mac Jones finished the year as QB 18, and he closed with an average draft position of 32. Now that's because nobody really knew during draft season that they were going to release Cam Newton and give the keys to Mac Jones immediately. So yeah, there's a chance that he could take a big leap forward and end up in QB1 territory. I will say that I don't think I'd feel great if I drafted him as my QB1. If I waited till the absolute end of the draft and drafted him and entered the season relying on him. Because I don't know if Bill Belichick, even maybe in his sophomore year, he can let him loose a little bit more. He can free Mac Jones, but I still think he'll be generally pretty conservative. All 3 backs that are around are gonna be the feature of that offense. I mean, Stevenson and Harrison, they deserve it. I'm not sure what James White's contract situation is off the top of my head, but we'll see. Who's the better option between him and Bolden. They'll run a 3-headed system. Hunter Henry will be involved. They'll do short passes, but I don't see Mac Jones suddenly jumping to someone who's going to 300 yards, 3 touchdowns every single game. He'll be a much better real life quarterback than he will be fantasy quarterback, which is basically the opposite of Fields.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think he'll be a bottom half QB2 territory, and that's I'm like. There are possible players the Patriots could improve. I know they spent a ton of money this past offseason, but if you give me another wide receiver that has more talent than a Kendrick Bourne, I thought the Patriots did a lot with Kendrick Bourne, but like more upgrades at that place, and then maybe an offensive philosophy that shifts away from giving Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson 20 carries each, then you have Mac Jones that could be fantasy relevant. But until that point happens, I agree with you. I'm not sure he's going to be a guy I'm drafting in most standard formats. We play in a lot of deeper leagues, so it's a little bit different. But in most standard formats, I think he probably falls outside of that first round. Any other quarterbacks that you liked value-wise this season?
I mean, another guy who wasn't necessarily a league winner unless you got him at the very end in the Superflex format. But I mean, Derek Carr took a huge jump from 25 ADP and finishing as QB 14. He wasn't necessarily winning you weeks, but he was absolutely consistent enough to warrant a Superflex spot every week. Now, I don't know what that necessarily means for next year. I mean, we'll see what that team looks like. I think that team's looking better, but again, they're going to have a new coach. He's going to have a new coach, so we'll see. I assume the Packers will franchise tag Adams, but I know Derek Carr loves Devontae Adams from the college days. So, if they don't tag him, that would obviously change the Carr outlook a lot, if Adams were to go over there. But right now, I think he's going to be valued similarly going into this season. He'll probably won't be inside the top 20 ADP, but it's consistent enough to scream in a lot of weeks. And he'll be a guy we talk about a lot next year when we do streaming options. And then the other guy who I wanted to mention on the award show, just because of the semifinals magic, got a lot of people to championship games and then maybe lost in championship games. But Tyler Huntley, had that one great week in the playoffs when it mattered most. A lot of Lamar owners made the direct switch, so he probably gets an honorable mention here. And whatever happens with him this offseason, if he sticks around in Baltimore, if the Ravens decide to maximize his value maybe on the trade market, he's an interesting player and possibly a low-dollar keeper if he gets the reins somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that trade value would be interesting. There are a lot of teams that are going to need quarterbacks this offseason. Broncos, Panthers, Steelers just jump out right away. Not that the Ravens are trading in the division, but there are going to be suitors for Huntley if and when a team loses out in the Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. And I think Huntley is going to be a fantastic fallback. And I was impressed with what he did against the Packers. I know the Packers ended up winning, and the Packers also are god-awful against mobile quarterbacks. We know that. But I think Huntley I think he might be the real deal in terms of a mid-tier, a little bit lower tier quarterback value, which is not what he's going to have with the Ravens and Lamar Jackson right around. So anybody else at quarterback, we're good to move on to running back.
Yeah, I think we're good to move on. That was the list here. Everybody else that finished in the top 15-ish, was basically ADP in the top 15-ish, or a not waiver wire candidate. We're going to try to keep the scope of this to guys that you could have logically, realistically picked up off the waiver wire this year.
Yeah, well, I think at running back, we should probably start first with the playoff hero of playoff heroes, and that was Rashad Penny, who finally had his first healthy stretch of his entire career and went absolutely ballistic. And now we're going to have this conversation. Is Rashad Penny a second, third, fourth round pick next year with what he did this year? And I think the answer is, God, I don't know. But what we saw on the field with the Seahawks is pretty incredible.
We need to see what happens with that roster necessarily, because I know Seattle's always done this. You know, they've gotten by with the subpar offensive line. We need to see what happens with Russell Wilson, if he stays, if he goes. We need to see, you know, who their replacement is if he goes, because, you know, if they end up with a subpar quarterback, or, you know, maybe Geno Smith has to start, then I'm not quite as excited about Rashad Penny. But yeah, Rashad Penny gets a nod here just because of the playoffs heroes. I mean, he finished the season with 26.3, 5.4, 19.5, 31.5, and 25 points. So that's semifinal, final, and if you play week 18 at all, that was an absolute league winner though. But if I had to give the award to one running back, and I could only pick one running back, I don't think he's the guy I'd pick, because I'd probably pick a guy who's done it all season long.
And that would be?
You know, Alan really wanted me to pick Elijah Mitchell with the cover boy, but I think when I was looking at it this morning, I think the award for top pickup of the entire year of any position has got to be Cordero Patterson. And let me tell you why here. He was his ADP was running back 163, 280 overall. But don't forget, his ADP would have been wide receiver 221. And in some formats, you could play him at both, and he was just as consistent as they come. If you were not a Mike Davis believer all year long, and jumped on Cordero Patterson the moment you got the chance to, I mean, that was a player that outside of the one, I think it was only one game that he missed. So you had his bye, and then one missed game. I mean, he was an absolute fantasy stud from He cooled off a little bit down the stretch. I can give you that.
I think is an understatement.
Yeah, so he cooled off a lot of it down the stretch with matchups against Buffalo and New Orleans and San Francisco. So very tough. But I mean, from week 2 to week 14, the guy was RB1, and he is responsible for a lot of playoff berths. Now, he might be responsible for a lot of playoff exits here as well. But for someone that you can get for nothing, he made a difference and definitely helped people win some points championships, even as far down as 10-team leagues. So the real question now with Cordero Patterson is,
what's next?
What do we do with him next season? And I got to be honest, I don't know what to think about him in his age 31 season here. Will he get double-digit touchdowns again? It looks like Matt Ryan's going to be back here, so there's some stability for sure. Maybe they draft somebody. I don't know, but I'm not willing to use a lot of draft capital on him necessarily. A 31-year-old guy that finally figured it out for the first time in what do we have, his 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, in his 9th NFL season? We'll see.
I think I might be okay with buying into Patterson. It really depends on his value. So a guy that scored that many touchdowns, generally, even at 31 years old, is like a second or third round pick. But I think a lot of people are going to have the same sentiment that you do, that, hey, he hasn't done this ever before. Was this just like a weird positive regression type of deal for someone that was as athletically skilled as we knew Patterson to be for his entire career, and a team finally figured it out? I mean, the circumstances in which Patterson was able to produce these numbers should more or less be the same next year. Maybe Matt Ryan doesn't suck as much, or Calvin Ridley comes back, and then there's by default less of a funnel going towards Patterson. But the red zone work, unless they really go out and get a star running back to complement Patterson, he's going to be the guy.
Well, the red zone work, Kyle Pitts needs to be featured more. I mean, God, that is one of the biggest coaching blunders of the whole year that I'll never understand. And then, of course, I guess it's too early to make a call on that now, but I hope all the best for Calvin Ridley and that he gets back and that he can get involved in that offense. So, presumed growth for Pitts and the return of Ridley means at least 100 less targets to go around here. So that's number one. So here's the hypothetical. Right now, at the end of the season, we rank Cordero Patterson 43 overall, which makes him an early to mid 4th round pick. I don't think personally I'd go above the 6th. Again, so much can change during the offseason in the landscape of that roster, but a 4th round pick, especially an early 4th round pick, that seems too early for me.
The 4th round pick is one thing. I would want to know which players are around there. It's a
All
cop
right.
out.
I've got it up right now. Now. 44 is Michael Pittman. 45 is James Conner. 46 is Ayuk. 47 is Tyler Lockett. 48 is Darren Waller. 49 is Leonard Fournette.
I'll take Patterson over every one of those guys besides Fournette and probably Waller.
Fournette, Waller, maybe even Lockett too. Well, again, Lockett, depending on his rust days.
Yeah.
I've always been a Michael Pittman guy too, so I don't know. Again,
that's high for him.
Yeah, that's
with
high
Carson
for him.
Wentz throwing. That's high for him.
Do we know for sure it's going to be Wentz?
I don't think they can get out of it. They don't have a 1st round pick.
Oh yeah, that's right. Carson Wentz spot track. Let's see what we got here. No, but you're right. Okay, so that was a good decision here. But let's give Elijah Mitchell his due, number one, and talk a little bit about the 49ers backfield because he does deserve a spot on this show. When he was active and when he was healthy, he gave some huge weeks, but that, it was really dependent on one, Raheem Mostert getting hurt pretty much before the season even started here. I don't even remember if he got a game in. And 2, Trey Sermon being a complete and total bust. You want to talk about busts that were busts for not injury-related reasons. Sermon sitting out the entire year after the supposed RB1 goes down for the season, and Jeff Wilson's not even available for half the season. You thought it would be him, but no, it was Elijah Mitchell, and he helped some people out, in a big way. When he was playing, it didn't really matter the matchup. You could stick him in as RB2 and feel confident about it. So he definitely gets a nod here. And holy crap, Carson Wentz, $22 million next year, 20 the year after, and 21 in 2024. So, anyway, I'm all over the place. But Elijah Mitchell, do you have any other thoughts on him?
Yeah, Allen has him as the top guy in there, only because Allen's into the dynasty stuff. So the younger running back that not a lot of people saw coming. I get it. I'm not convinced Elijah Mitchell will be the starter next year just because the 49ers can literally make any running back be successful. And maybe it is Trey Sermon. Maybe it's somebody else they signed. You have to remember, this is the same franchise that, despite knowing in Kyle Shanahan's system, I can guarantee a 1,000-yard rusher literally off the street. We're going to go ahead and invest $30 million in Jerick McKinnon. We're going to go ahead and resign Raheem Mostert to a 3-year, $20 million deal. Like they put money into the running back position even when they don't have to, and now they put draft capital into it. And oh, by the way, it's the lesser of the draft capitals. I almost wonder, not that Kyle Shanahan's ever proven to be a guy that says, I need to make my investments count, because again, I just rattled off 3 different ones that all sucked, that they were dumb at doing those for. I'm not convinced Mitchell will be the starter by the end of the season for the 49ers just because of how often they change things. And yes, he was effective. But again, I think anybody can be pretty darn effective. And Raheem Mostert might be back next season too.
So would you draft Patterson over Mitchell next year?
That's where I'm getting at. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say I could maybe buy that. I have to see what happens with the rest of both of these rosters here. But if you had to do it today, I could buy one more. Especially, the other thing is, are these sites going to come around and give Patterson RBWR eligibility here? Now the multi-position eligibility, it's huge in baseball. It really helps, your flexibility with your roster because there's so many damn positions. But in football, it is rare if ever happens. And that alone could boost his value quite a bit because it just gives you a ton of flexibility instead of, going into the waiver wire one week being like, dang it, I have to fill wide receiver 3 and they're crap options, or dang it, I have to fill RB2 and there are junk options here. You can be like, I'm just going to go for the best player available regardless of position, because then I can put Patterson in the other one. And having that decision-making will be big here. Now, if they draft a top running back, I'm a little concerned. If everybody comes back, I'm a little concerned. 11 touchdowns seems sustainable enough for him. So, I guess we'll see. He doesn't have as much tread on the tires as one might think because he was always underutilized. Minnesota never figured it out. So You know what? Maybe I started the show thinking, you know what? I'm not so high on Patterson, but maybe I'm convincing myself over the course of the show here. A 4th round pick still might be a little early for me, but we'll see how everything shakes out next year. And also remember, I'm using an end of season list,
Right.
to rank these players. There's going to be rookies probably in that top 50 rookie running backs, depending on circumstances and where everyone goes. So that'll change things up as well.
Yeah, the key that I want people who love fantasy to start thinking about this more. Patterson's one thing, but Deebo Samuel, I think, towards the end of the year, should be having fantasy like a fantasy league makers, so ESPN, Yahoo, NFC, like those, they should be really considering this dual eligibility more, because Deebo Samuel played as much running back, if not more running back by the end of the year for the 49ers than he did wide receiver. And I think that's what makes fantasy baseball and fantasy basketball to a lesser extent, the multi-positional eligibility, a lot of fun. I want more of that in the NFL when it applies. And I think both Patterson and Samuel work great for that theory.
I will say the reason sites don't do it is because of the tech side.
Yeah,
it's the tech side of it. It's not as bad as Shohei Ohtani. All right, Ohtani being pitcher hitter in fantasy baseball. These two categories have been separated forever, and there's never any overlap. That is a programmer's nightmare here. This maybe isn't. I can't speak from a ton of experience. This maybe isn't quite as bad as that, but I will tell you straight up that it's still a large pain in the ass to deal with. And can you ever think of any other player that was RB? Felton this year, did he get it? So it's the framework is there for some leagues, but I don't know if people are going to
last year is like the perfect example.
Eventually that just got changed, though.
It was the easy way out.
Yeah, it got changed. So I'm just saying that it would surprise me zero if sites just said Samuel's a receiver. Tough if you don't like it.
Right. I get it. I just think that's the next wave of evolution in fantasy football, is having these multi-positional eligibility guys being recognized as such. And what does that do for their value in the same way that quarterbacks over the last 6 or 7 years rose up in value, or the zero running back strategy? Like those, I think multi-positional eligibility is interesting.
Now, if commissioners want to adapt, instead of having 2 running back spots, you have a running back and a running back / receiver flex, right? Because then it doesn't matter.
Yes.
So you can just adapt that way too. That's another reason. Like, there's a workaround. So maybe sites don't do that, but obviously, as savvy fantasy players, you'll figure your way around any workaround.
Yeah, that's true. Any other running backs that you wanted to mention that had drastic implications for fantasy managers out there?
Yeah, Daryl Williams was barely drafted at 185 overall, RB58 in the NFFC's ADP. He finished as RB22 and had some massive, and you pretty much knew which weeks to play him too. The weeks that Clyde Edwards-Helaire were out, so he wasn't necessarily burning you in his bad weeks. So I think he gets a nod on here. And I also need to talk about another semifinal hero that carried everyone to the championship that decided to pick him up. Justin Jackson, 32.2 half PPR points at Houston. He's kind of my 1 week wonder here, not someone that won you a league consistently over the year, but savvy, timely pickups there to really help things out.
How about the other side of that? Rex Burkhead, Mr. 140 yards and 2 touchdowns himself, as the Texans decimated the Chargers' chances at making the playoffs. Rex Burkhead was great too. And you have mentioned something I think is really key. This fantasy playoffs, more than any other one that I can remember, was entirely dependent on either A, getting the Bengals and Chase and Higgins and Burrow, or B, picking up the right players at the right time, whether it be Daryl Williams, Justin Jackson, Rex Burkhead, Amon-Ra St. Brown, if you were in a shallower league. Like, there were so many waiver wire guys that directly were part of championship rosters that I can never remember. I don't know if it's because of the COVID stuff or just that point of the season where the matchups were a little bit tough. Teams were maybe resting their guys a little bit more. The Jonathan Taylors of the world had a bit more steam kind of run out, even though I know you won our dynasty league, so you can celebrate that with Jonathan Taylor. Great.
I didn't win it. Benzine
I thought you took. Oh yeah, you're right.
Benzine beat me in the final.
Just absolutely.
Benzine that's full PPR, and Jamar Chase dropped 55 on me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he just absolutely destroyed DJ in that.
Let me say this though: if we played Week 18, I had Dak go for 5 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor didn't do that great, but a bunch of my players went nuts in Week 18. And if we did a Week 17, 18 combined, the things might have gone differently. But hats off to Benzine. He deserves the win.
I hate that.
He took Chase first overall. He finished last year, took Chase first overall in the redraft. And, I was just like, is this guy insane? Not all the not all the preseason, stuff about him not seeing the ball had been out at that point. But he took chase overall and effectively went worst to first. So, that's not an easy thing to do in dynasty leagues, in any kind of league. So, hats off to him. I gotta hand it to him. But hey, 2 years doing that league. I'm in first and second finishes, and I've got Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry locked in indefinitely. So I've got another year of taking it to you guys for sure.
That's right. Okay, we'll move over to the wide receivers. But before we do, let's get a word from our sponsors, Hall of Fame. This episode of the Rotowire Fantasy Podcast is brought to you by HOFR, daily fantasy sports redefined. No confusing salary caps, no annoying player drafts, just simple multiple choice questions of the stats you know and players you love. That's right. The majority of HOFR's contests focus on single sporting events and only feature questions about popular players and recognizable stats, allowing users to make their picks confidently and quickly. Plus, you never play against the house or versus those fancy sharks. The playing field is level for even the most amateur user to find him or herself landing in the money. Unlike those other apps where an incorrect answer can end your night, and HOFR, incorrect answers never eliminate you from competition. I played the other night, and the question was simple as, well, how many touchdowns is Tom Brady going to throw, or which player's going to have the most rushing yards? So make your NFL Sunday picks, or I guess Saturday now with the playoffs coming up, with confidence and ease at HOFR. So don't wait another second. Download HOFR. That's HOFR, like the letters, from the Apple App Store or Google Play Store right now. HOFR, it's everything the fantasy sports world has been waiting for. Okay, at wide receiver, we had already mentioned Patterson, the dual eligibility stuff, so we could kind of move past that.
Yep,
it's got to be Hunter Renfro as one of the top pickups this year, and his 2-touchdown performance against the Chargers kind of capped off what I thought was interesting. That hey, he's a small, quick receiver, and yet one of the better red zone threats in the NFL at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the old narrative was you had to be 6'5", 260 to be a valid red zone target, but now they're finding sneaky little guys that can, make space in areas, be effective on those pick plays too. But overall, I mean, what was it, like week 3 or 4? We kind of we denoted Hunter Renfro as like the
Hunter Renfro line,
the Hunter Renfro line, and then ever since then, he just started getting better and better and better and better. And granted, he had to have one of his teammates crash a car at 200 to, open up some of those targets. Fair enough. And then, of course, Waller got hurt too. So all those things. So it was more than just his skill level that turned into him being wide receiver 12 this year. That's wide receiver 12. He's a WR1. I mean, you go from 273 and ADP to wide receiver 12. That is impressive as hell. And we talked about Derek Carr. Kind of sneaking. He was also a huge one in that ADP. So yeah, that Vegas team's going to be interesting for next year. So will Renfro's ADP here. I think I'm afraid people are going to overreact to it. But again, we'll see what that alignment looks like, and if they bring in anybody.
Where is his redraft value in entering next season? Because that's an interesting one for me too. In a full point PPR format, I don't know. Like he's going to get 150 plus targets each season at minimum. Even if I guess like if Devontae Adams came to the Raiders, he won't. I just don't, unless Rodgers is there. That's a different question. I think Renfro is like solidly in that 4, 5, 6 range, but I'm curious where we have him ranked right now.
Yeah, I don't know if this ranking's perfectly good, but we've got him around 112, which is probably low if we're ranking for next year. So
yeah, okay.
That's putting him in round 6 through 8.
And I think they do that off the standard or like half point PPR, and that's
I've got it set for half point.
Okay.
Actually, no, I have it set for standard. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens to him when I go to PPR. Whoops, I didn't even realize that. So, I mean, these rankings are just kind of a baseline here. It's it is what it is. Let's see what we have here. Renfro, yeah, he's about the same. So maybe it says 2022 fantasy rankings. Maybe we're a little bit low on him, but I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to judge the genius who put Jonathan Taylor top 5 this year. So I'm going to leave that be.
Yeah, I would want to see. I would want to see what the Raiders do, because Bryan Edwards is supposed to be the second coming to the best wide receivers. It hasn't happened yet. Zay Jones has been, I think, like an afterthought too. So in some ways, it's been Darren Waller and Hunter Renfro, and that's it. And the Raiders are going to have to add somebody at wide receiver, whether it be, I don't know. I think like Michael Gallup before his injury would have been kind of perfect on that outside type of spot.
Yeah, that would have been. That's great. I like
right.
That.
Like there are going to be those players available this offseason that make sense for the Raiders, or they could draft somebody. And I don't, there's a lot of momentum that this team has right now, getting into the playoffs, the new stadium now in year 2 for the Raiders in Las Vegas. I think they they can in some ways have Renfro have less opportunities and him still be just as efficient, if not more so, with those opportunities.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. So I mean, that ADP where we're at suggests like round 8 or later. But I could see him
I'll
being
take
a
him
fifth,
way
sixth.
before then.
Yeah, give me a 5th, 6th rounder next year. I can get on with that.
Let's hit another wide receiver. We mentioned Patterson, Renfro. I think it's got to be Darnell Mooney as the next one, at least of the regular season. We'll get to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I now have to make sure I say his name correctly because he's just a dynamite threat at all times. But first, Darnell Mooney, he surprised me in particular. But we were both thinking, hey, if there's a Bears wide receiver that goes off, it's Allen Robinson. And then by like halfway through the podcast, we're like, all right, F it, we got to cut him every single week. Like it's dropping Allen Robinson time. And he's another guy too that this offseason could go to a different team and be more interesting.
I had absolutely zero Darnell Mooney, maybe a best ball or two, because 1, I knew quarterback play was going to be terrible. 2, I figured, Allen Robinson would be awake for part of the season. Obviously that was incorrect. And, and 3, bad organization, bad quarterback play. And 4, I'm just repeating myself now, but no, he was always big play dependent really too, important. Right? He was always, I mean, I got to stress those 1 and 3, they're the same. But also he was always kind of big play dependent, right? So you could get his big weeks in best ball, but have to settle with 1 catch, 9-yard weeks too. He ended up being more consistent than I gave him credit for. So, that's great and all. We'll see where he ends up. I'm not in any kind of a rush to draft him. His ADP was 112 this past year. And I don't really see that changing necessarily. I don't know. I don't even know if you draft him as a wide receiver 3. He's more of a bye week fill-in type guy, hoping you catch one of his big weeks. Hoping if Chicago's where he stays, you expect improvement in quarterback play there. So he was definitely a useful fantasy asset this year, no doubt about it here. But my outlook on him hasn't necessarily changed a ton.
You wouldn't draft Mooney as a wide receiver 3?
Yeah, I mean, again, it would so much depends, but I don't feel great about it. I want to see where he goes.
Better. I think the offense can only get better because it was one of the worst in the league. Justin Fields in year 2, I think, and guaranteed as the starter, not this Andy Dalton BS. Like, I think that can only help. And when Fields was healthy, he was looking at Mooney like that was his number 1 guy. And even though it's a bad offense theoretically, a number 1 guy has some value. I think time and time again this season we've seen that in particular. So I think Mooney's a wide receiver 3 in that 8-9 range, like where we were drafting DJ Chark last year. I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, and I mean it'll be his 3rd year in the league. So if you buy the 3rd-year breakout narrative, he's only 24 this year. So I mean maybe he can come around. I gotta erase some of that Bears bias, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Time to talk about him. The Sun God himself, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Alan and I discussed him in detail last week because we were kind of tipping our toes into the dynasty conversation as to like, hey, if you're doing a complete dynasty redraft, where are you drafting Amon-Ra? And I said 4th round, and I'll be curious where that conversation ends up going more this offseason after what has been just a scintillating end to the year. But that guy literally won you leagues. And I've always told people, hey, if you could do the donate to the charity if a player helps you out. I'm buying the rookie card for a player that helps me win a championship. And I'm buying a lot of Amon-Ra and a lot of Jamar Chase this offseason when it's actually cheap enough for me to do so.
Isn't this ultimate like buy high on Chase?
Yeah, I'm wasting money on Chase for sure. Exactly. But Amon-Ra, maybe not so much. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on him.
Yeah, I mean the guy's a stud, and he's getting a tremendous amount of volume here. Now there are a couple 10-point on the dots, but he didn't actually surpass 10 fantasy points in half-point PPR until week 13, which started a stretch of 19.8, 11.3, 19.5, 21.5, 31.5 in the championship, and 22.1 in week 18 for good measure. He was wide receiver 75, 202 overall. And, because all of his production was backloaded, it's not going to be the same. But he's a guy that's going to have a ton of helium up in draft boards, and absolutely is going to be a low-dollar keeper for a lot of people here. So he was a league winner for people that, whether it was, Antonio Brown or DeAndre Hopkins or any of these receivers that went down and really hurt you. He was a league winner, and you recovered for him. And oh man, a 4th-round pick, it's so tough to tell because it's going to depend on what's all around. And he does play for the Lions after all, but I don't see, necessarily them having to get a ton of them to necessarily stop having to play catch up is what I'm trying to say here. I don't think that team suddenly gets a whole lot better. Now, a healthy Swift for 16 games, which we haven't been able to count on yet, that might take a little bit of volume away, but I'm absolutely fine with making the Sun God a top 20, top 25 receiver next year.
Yeah, and so my thought is, given what he did these past couple weeks and how he's going to be fondly remembered by a lot of people, he's going to be overdrafted. We just talked about Darnell Mooney and Hunter Renfro and 6th through 8th round and how that's going to be value. I bet you Amon-Ra gets higher than that. And I'm not convinced the Lions offense is going to look drastically better this year than they did last year. So maybe that helps, but you're going to have a fully healthy DeAndre Swift, a fully healthy TJ Hawkinson. And if you remember, St. Brown wasn't Amon-Ra St. Brown until after Hawkinson went down. I think anything like in that 4th or 5th round range where I really believe he probably will end up going is going to be too high of a draft for me with what we saw this past year.
I would be willing to bet that Sun God is drafted well ahead of Renfro, but I would be shocked zero if Renfro outproduces him next year.
That's a great
we'll
line. I completely agree.
That could be, save that old takes exposed. I could very well get burned by that if, he somehow manages this pace all year long. But I believe that that's a very realistic scenario.
Anybody else at wide receiver that you wanted to mention real quick that deserves recognition in our award show this year?
Yeah, I was looking down the list. Nobody else really stands out a ton. Christian Kirk, Kendrick Bourne, Russell Gage were all productive for fantasy players at certain points, but, they also had their bad weeks too. I got to throw out Allen Lazard just for a couple of reasons. After his week 13 bye, he went 17.9, then a dud with 3.8, then finished 12.8, 16.2, 22. And the reason I want to mention Lazard is not only was he a decent playoff option, but I think if you're doing fantasy football playoff drafts, which, I'd like to get together with maybe 3 friends and draft a roster for the playoffs, and you get to keep them as long as they stay alive. Lazard is going to be a very, very sneaky pick in that because obviously everyone knows about, Devontae Adams, but Lazard, has been back. He seems to be the wide receiver too. MVS could get some big plays here once in a while, but Lazard has been the guy Rodgers looks to after Devontae in the red zone, especially, because the tight end situation, he doesn't have his tight end one necessarily this year. So Lazard's a sneaky guy I think you can get later in playoff drafts.
I like that. That's an interesting name. And anytime we could talk more fantasy, even if it's playoff fantasy, NFL playoff fantasy, I should say, I'm all for it. Other guys, real quick, Christian Kirk, Kendrick Bourne, Russell Gage, KJ Osborne. I actually started Christian Kirk in my NFFC team almost the entire year, which ended up taking second place, the Beat Joe Bartel Rotowire Online Championship. Didn't finish in the money. Sorry, Jake. I'm not able to share that. The big kudos to you or the 200,000. But at least
I did see, I know our customer support sent out all the Beat Expert ABC type of people this week. And, some of our other experts got worked. So congrats on finishing second.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with it. And we went through a lot. I mean, there's a lot of different injuries to a lot of different players, as most people did. I thought that was a really successful season and probably, unfortunately of my 15 leagues, that was one of my best ones. I did not do very well in a few other places. So Christian Kirk is a wide receiver 3, ended up working out really well. And I know they drafted Rondale Moore and they have DeAndre Hopkins. They have AJ Green. There's no reason statistically Christian Kirk next year should be anything more than a wide receiver, probably wide receiver 4 or 5 for people. But we know how good that offense can be if something works out in his favor. And man, it's a really tantalizing aspect for me for a depth piece once again next year.
Yeah, I mean, I expect Rondale Moore to maybe get a little bit better and see some more usage. I wasn't a huge believer going into the season, but he turned me around a little bit watching him play more often. And I think if they use him right, he'll be more productive than Kirk next year.
Yeah. Okay. Tight ends. I'm looking at a rundown. I'm shocked at this figure. So I want you just to clarify after I repeat it that this is in fact a real thing. Dalton Schultz, Cowboys Titan Dalton Schultz, was the number 3 overall fantasy tight end this season. Is that correct?
Let me double check that because I gotta, check it. But in half-point PPR, I've got it up on my other screen over here. Mark Andrews, number 1, 247.6. Travis Kelce, number 2, 216.8. Dalton Schultz, number 3, 169.8, and even with all the
like an 80-point drop off between the second and third.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, remember Waller missed all those games and he was hurt, so he didn't have it going on. Kittle missed a lot of games, and then kind of I think Kittle got hurt at the end of the season and just never went reported because he was an absolute stud, and then it just kind of dropped off a bit. And then Zach Ertz was tight end 5 here. So, there's a whole lot going on with the tight end position. But you get a guy pretty much universally undrafted, tight end 80, 251 overall ADP. The guy went nuts.
Incredible.
So the question is, again, I saw a lot of fantasy playoff, a lot of fantasy titles starting Dalton Schultz. The question is how do you identify him? Because I know I wasn't such a believer after week 1. He had 6 targets at Tampa Bay, and then just caught 2 for 18 in week 2. And then his breakout game, he had 6 for 80 and 2 touchdowns in week 3. And, Blake Jarwin, the other guy there, he didn't get hurt and go on the IR until week 9. So I would see Dalton Schultz succeed in games, and I would think to myself, they've got Lamb and Cooper, who are the top 2 guys. They've got capable pass-catching backs. Gallup got hurt, of course, and that, opened up more targets. But I had a tough time really clicking and wanting to pick him up. Maybe part of that is because I always use a lot of draft stock on the top tight ends. I ended up with a lot of Kittle, Waller, one
you're no
Kelsey
Fant
this
guy
year.
too.
Yeah, and I ended up, you're right. I was a big Fant guy in that same tier here, and I thought he was going to be just fine. So I didn't rush to pick him up, but maybe that's a lesson I have to learn. With these tight ends, having a valuable tight end too is important. And Dak loves the tight end. What can I say?
Yeah, I'm like, what do I do with this information that Dalton Schultz is number 3 scorer? It's not like the Cowboys offense, I think, is going to get worse next year. I think they're one of the best, and Dak Prescott's really darn good. And even if Michael Gallup does leave for greener pastures, whatever, that they have so many other good guys that it's not going to hurt things. Do I think Dalton Schultz will be the number 3 scorer again next year? No, I don't think so. I think Waller and Kittle could maybe stay more healthy, or somebody else emerges. But you look at the rest of the guys, and we'll talk about these ones real quick, but just off the rundown that you have, Zach Ertz was the number 5 scorer. Gronk was number 6. Dawson Knox, number 8. I played Dawson Knox in enough leagues. You weren't excited to have Dawson Knox. It was touchdown or anything. I mean, the tight end.
It was touchdown or bust.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
sorry, touchdown or anything. Touchdown or bust. It was so, the tight end position is so, it has such lack of depth that, I think Dalton Schultz as a top 5 or 6 option is entirely plausible next year, and almost makes me think, can I get Dalton Schultz later on with the same people fading him like we were this entire year, or is he going to be pushed up too high in like the 7th or 8th round among those Noah Fants? And
if you re-rank them,
whatever.
Just re-rank the tight ends. Kelsey has to be number 1 again. And then you still have Andrews would probably be ranked number 2 going into next year. Waller, Kittle still have to be there. And I think Pitts has a case for number 5. Dalton Schultz will probably be ranked tight end 6 on most preseason rankings, I imagine. Could you make a case for Fant, getting better? It'll depend, what that
prior
situation
moves would be
looks like.
Maybe one with the Steelers, what they do at quarterback.
Yeah, but I mean, who's going to throw to the tight end more than Big Ben?
A rookie quarterback.
Yeah, that, or maybe if Rodgers goes there, he could sneak a Tunyon type year. But so basically, after what I'm saying again is after those top 6 tight ends, and I don't even know if you want to put Schultz in that tier. You probably could. I mean, Gallup out, Cedric Wilson basically sticks around and is in, can be just as productive here. It's a 3 wide receiver set team. But again, after that top 5, you're kind of toast, and you're hoping to get lightning in a bottle here, which just doesn't happen all that often.
Yeah, and the lightning in the bottle would have been Zach Ertz otherwise, who ended up being tight end 5. I think the best value for him is the Cardinals, but after that, because he is a free agent this offseason, the next best value is the Colts. And I can guarantee you, if Zach Ertz signs with the Colts, he will be a top 5 fantasy tight end next year, provided he's healthy. I will stake my name to that one. Carson Wentz and Frank Reich.
I'm going to give you that for sure. That is the dream destination here. Now, Ertz was a guy I drafted with like one of my last picks in a lot of leagues, but in the shallower ones, I definitely cut him early on. And then had to pick him back up in the league that I ended up finishing with him in. But if he goes to Indianapolis, geez, it's game over. It's lights out. I believe that. He'll be in his age 32 season next year, so he's getting there. But I still think that at that position, you can be productive in your 30s.
Yeah, I think he is going to be a guy that, and the Colts should be looking at tight end with Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox kind of struggling with injuries and whatever else. They really should be looking for that combination to be effective. So I think Zach Ertz is going to be huge. And then Freiermuth, again, I mentioned him. Not Big Ben is almost certainly gone, but if there is a rookie quarterback that goes to Pittsburgh, rookie quarterbacks love tight ends, and I think Freiermuth really showed me something as a Zach Ertz light type of tight end, which is by no means a slight on him whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. So that pretty much wraps it up for tight ends. But I mean, yeah, you're right. Ertz could definitely get into that top 10 ranking depending on destination.
Yeah, normally we do like a redraft, or sorry, like a start to the first round of next year. I'll be honest, Jake, I wasn't quite prepared for that. So instead, to end the show, I want to just basically dunk on everyone and talk about how great we were with the over-unders that we projected at the very beginning of the season.
Great or slightly profitable,
Hey, Vegas is upset that we are slightly profitable.
We beat the books. Right now. We'll say that. So, yeah. How did our board bet end up, Joe?
Hold on. Jake, I need to give my final rundown of the year, or the final read of the year.
Oh, final read. Okay, you're right.
Final read of our podcast edition for this season, at least. Skybox Sports Network is a hardcore source for odds and sports tickers. Skybox Sports has created an entertaining and relevant products for restaurants, sports, bars, casinos, racing sports, book arenas, stadiums, etc. Now you can get that little bit of Vegas in your own fan cave. Skybox's low-cost and state-of-the-art Wi-Fi platform is a simple and affordable plug, play, and active format. Skybox Sports Tickers bring you live odds, propositions, fantasy sports, hires, fires, trades, breaking news, and recaps. Really anything you can imagine, with in-depth coverage for all these different sports: NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, NASCAR, UFC, specialty events, and really so much more. Visit skyboxsportsnetwork.com and use promo code Rotowire5 for a 5% discount off of your order. Jake, I know you have a house. That is a perfect place for your house right now to go have one of those sports tickers up there. As soon as I can eventually get into that same realm where I'm a homeowner, I'm excited to dive into that platform too. So I talked about the over-unders we had done at the very beginning of the year, picking every single team, every single division, and their over-unders. We both came out ahead. In fact, we both finished with identical 5-12-5 records, despite the fact that we had different picks in a lot of different ways. It's kind of incredible how it all worked out.
Yeah. Somehow 15, 12, and 5. So 5 pushes there that were, that weren't the 0.5 numbers, and we're right on the dot. That is enough to be profitable long term. Granted, we each only did it for 1 year, but I will say that is enough to save that segment for next year. We'll do it again before the season here. Out of that 15, 12, and 5 record, I had four plays signifies is what I called my best bets. I won 2 of them. I had Cowboys over 9.5 wins and Bears under 7.5 wins. The Bears one was shooting fish in the table. I believed in the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy more than, what did I say, shooting fish in a barrel, not shooting fish
the table is fine too. If there's a fish in a table, you probably shot that pretty well too.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It'd be pretty hard to hit. It's flopping around. Anyway.
As opposed to a barrel. I think they're equally easy.
Yeah, I guess you're swimming in a barrel. Okay, fair enough. Anyway, bad expression. Okay, we're gonna end the year just like that, right? So no, and then I had Patriots under 9.5, and man, they gave me a push towards the end. With a not so strong finish, kind of sliding into the playoffs. They ended up with 10 wins, so I lost that bet, and I pushed the Bills over 11. They ended up with exactly 11. So 2-1-1 in best bets, 15, 12, and 5. I'll take it. I mean, it's good enough to do this next year. I got to when we go to Vegas this summer, I'm going to have to lay down some more of these. Maybe just do $10 a team and hopefully come out ahead again and just wheelbarrow a stack of tickets over back for next year.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting. You went completely perfect on the NFC North division. You had over on the Packers 10 wins, under on the Vikings 9, under on the Bears 7.5, under on the Lions 4.5.
Yeah, you paid off being a homer, I guess.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Packers over and everybody else under. The rest of these teams are trash.
You really knew the NFC North well. Conversely, you had no idea what was happening in the NFC West. You got literally every one of those wrong. Under 10.5 wins for the Rams, over 10.5 for the Niners. We both got that one wrong. Over 10 for the Seahawks. It's crazy to think how far that Russell Wilson injury really led the Seahawks down that path. And then under 8.5 for the Cardinals. The Cardinals ended up being way better than we anticipated too. There was no bigger surprise, I think, than the Eagles. We both had under 6.5 wins, obviously qualified for the playoffs. I think they finished either with 9 or 10. The stupid 18 games kind of messes me up in that mindset. But I liked this exercise quite a bit. And while my best bet, which was also that under 9.5 wins for the Patriots, did end up losing, I thought it really kind of it got us into the right mindset for understanding what the NFL is going to give us this season. And for the most part, I think we were pretty effective in that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, us both going under on the Patriots was kind of assuming that either Cam Newton starts 16 games for them or Cam Newton starts 8, stinks, and then goes to a rookie. We didn't really anticipate at the time Mac Jones taking over week 1 and playing very serviceably in that system. So, not to make excuses, that was a loss. A loss is a loss. We didn't see that one quite right. Maybe shouldn't bet against Belichick. That could be a lesson we take into next year. We'll see. But I mean, that number is going to be higher than 9.5 next year. People are going to expect him to progress.
I agree. Ultimately, the Cam Newton, Mac Jones thing, really what we did wrong was bet against Bill Belichick, and you're never supposed to bet against Bill Belichick. That was
a way to figure it out.
That was the one thing we took a loss on. But you know what? That does it for us, Jake. We'll be back again next year around this mid-July.
Couple weeks after 4th of July, usually it goes.
Mid-July,
early
August. Hopefully I won't have a kid inbound, so there won't be any of those conversations. I'll be really learning some things today if that was the case. So
you guys, I mean, I'm sure the listeners out there will see Joe quite a bit over the course. I mean, I'll be back probably once a month to do an MMA show over on the MMA YouTube channel, and then you'll probably see too much of me in March Madness. I'll probably join you guys on XM for that. So those are the next chances you have to look forward to me. Otherwise, I go into hibernation between the end of the college basketball season and the start of football season. But overall, hey, it's a pleasure. It's always fun doing this. Even as the role has evolved here, and for me, and even as we get absorbed by another company here, the once a week NFL podcast. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to let that go. So
I agree.
Hopefully you guys enjoy the content that we've produced. I mean, all these award winners we've at least mentioned by name. Maybe we weren't always super high on them at the time, but you're going to get all the names here, and then hopefully you can take that, use it with whatever else you do to research, and make some league winning pickups. And helping you guys is really what it's all about. So thanks for tuning in all year.
I appreciate that, and I think that's exactly correct. And hopefully the listeners are able to take away some bits of information, use it effectively in your waiver wire or auction, free agent stuff. I think it's been great, and I've loved doing these shows with you, Jake. Now, and I hope to do it again next year. And looking forward to that role. That officially does it for us in the Tuesday, January 11th edition, the final Rotowire weekly NFL podcast. Mario and Jake will be back, I think, every other week or something like that.
Mario and John.
Mario and John. Thank you.
Go Dogs. Go Dogs.
Yeah, John's just gone somewhere celebrating the Georgia victory. Good for
I
him.
don't know. He might be in jail right now. We'll see.
I hope so. I would be. If
exactly.
Win. That's Mario and John every other week or every week. I'm not quite sure what their schedule is. And then Alan Solowski, who we've had on now the past 2 weeks, will be also doing, I believe, either a weekly or bi-weekly podcast focusing specifically on Dynasty information and pickups and bringing a lot of different guests. His first one's going to be Jerry Diamond, I think, in next week or 2 weeks. So a lot of great content still in the Rotowire NFL Podcast Network. Just won't be us every Tuesday. So officially signing off. And again, this is brought to you by WynnBET. They've been fantastic partners for us the entire season. You can follow them at WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for Rotowire's Fantasy Podcast. Again, thanks everyone for listening.